The Sony 28-70 f2 is a lens we can get excited about because it's a new lens, but also because it's unlike anything Sony has done in the past few years. Sony has just been doing their own thing, revamping existing lenses, making them smaller, making them clinically sharper, but they never really stepped outside of their comfort zone. So this is an indication that maybe they're starting to take some inspiration from people like Sigma, who made that 28-45 f1.8, and from Tamron, who made the 35-150. Tamron has openly stated that they aren't interested in making prime lenses anymore. They only want to make zoom lenses in categories and focal lengths of zoom lenses that just don't exist. So that's a reason why we can kind of get excited about this lens, because it's a little bit different to what they've done before. This is their first constant f2 zoom lens. Now, they're not the first person to do this. Obviously, Canon has made exactly the same lens a few years ago. And speaking of Canon and Sony potentially embracing new lens ideas, what lenses would you like to see Sony make next? The biggest one I think I'd like to see them make is their version of the 24-105 f2.8 that Canon has obviously made last year, I think. The current f4 version is definitely in need of an update. Hasn't been revamped yet, so maybe it's possible. What do you think? Now, we are shooting with the 28-70 right now. I'm going to try and shoot as much of this video with the lens as I physically can, while I tell you some things about it and some things you should know. Now, this is going to be one of the biggest deterrents for most people. The fact that you have to use a step-down ring to use the most common filter thread size, which is an 82mm, because this filter thread is an 86. So on the lens right now, I actually have a step down ring. This is an 86-82mm filter thread, and we're at 28 f2 on the lens here, and you can't see the edges. And if I put this Peter McKinnon Polar Pro adapter on here, the Helix Maglock, I can't remember the name of it. If we put this on the front here, you'll see that we still can't see the edges. So that's on there. And then if we add the actual filter itself, so this is a 2-5 ND. Attach this. Take the front off, and let's fix the exposure here a bit because you can't see me. You'll see, we're a little dark, let's go a bit more. You'll see that you actually can't see the edges still. So there's no problem using a step down ring from 86 to 82 with whatever filter of choice you want to use. These are pretty thick compared to some other filter options out there, especially because this is a variable ND. So know that you can use filters with this and you won't see the edges, you won't get that vignette. I wanted to provide another example here. So that's how much is stacked on the front there with that step down ring. We are using the 28-70 and we're actually at 28 there. So look around the edges, specifically the corners. We're looking for a vignette that we might see from that filter or the step down ring, and you can see that you can't see one at 28 or at 70. So a bit of a different example there for you to see. Just need to charge some batteries here because they are starting to die. I don't have a plug handy right now. Okay, let's get that out of the way. Now, f2 versus f2.8 doesn't sound like a huge amount on paper. It doesn't even look like a huge amount, but that's actually a full stop, which means it's twice as fast. That's going to have two impacts on the way you shoot. It's going to be better for low light, and it's also going to have an impact or a performance increase on your depth of field, the bokeh you see in the background. Now, just how much of a difference is that going to have? Well, this right here is at f2 at about 40 mils right now. Let's change this to f2.8, and then we'll do a side-by-side comparison so you can see. So now we've changed this to f2.8. I've compensated with ISO, and this is how f2.8 looks. Let's put it side by side with the f2 and see if you can really tell a difference in terms of the depth of field in the background. Now, that might not be as noticeable, but if I change the ISO back to what it was at for f2, this is what that looks like. So it's going to be darker. Now, to a degree, you'll be able to compensate this in post, but generally speaking, if you're in a lower light situation, like you're shooting a wedding or something where you need as much light as you can, f2 versus f2.8 is going to make a big difference. Now, another thing you're likely going to hear discussed is the size and the weight of this compared to a lot of other Sony glass that's out there. And while comparatively it is quite big and heavy, this is it next to the 135 G Master there for reference. It's a little bit bigger. This is it compared to the Tamron 35-150, so it's a bit smaller than that. Now, if you extend this to 70, it's pretty close, almost identical in size to the Tamron 35 to 150 there. But for reference here, to really show you the engineering that has gone into creating this lens, the Canon counterpart of this lens weighs a mammoth 1,430 grams. Now that lens is beautiful. I have shot with it a couple of years ago at a Canon event, but it always felt incredibly front heavy, and it is massive as well. 1,430 grams is very heavy for a lens. By comparison, the Tamron 35 to 150 here, that comes in at 1165 grams. So if you've owned or used the Tamron, everyone immediately says, or the first thing they say is how big and heavy it is. That's how much heavier the Canon one is. By comparison, this Sony 28 to 70 f2 is 918 grams. It is 36% lighter than the Canon counterpart, which is the identical lens. It's also a 28 to 70 f2. So it's exciting in that they are creating new lenses, but also at the same time they're looking at what the competition did, kind of saying, hold my beer, and 3 years later doing the same thing, but way better. You saw me charging with this earlier. This is the sponsor of today's video. It's the Bluetti EB3A, and it'll charge these Sony batteries 16 times. But I've actually been using it around my studio because my space is a lot older and I don't have a lot of outlets like you have in newer buildings. I have one there and a ton of extension cables, which often don't reach. So if I want to walk back and power like a practical lamp or one of my Amaran lights, you can do that because there's AC power directly on here. So I can literally just pick this up. I can plug this directly into the unit itself because it has AC and DC power. Turn it on, and it'll turn that light on. There you go. Now it'll tell me real time how long it's going to last. So it says there it's going to last for about 30 hours because that's drawing such a little amount of power. This is the other one I find myself needing to power quite frequently over here, and I'll typically use V-mount batteries, which don't last as long, but I've got it plugged into the EB3A right here, and you can see it's drawing 17 watts, 16 watts, and it'll last about 12.7 hours. That's a great way to power a director's monitor if you're on set. As you can see on the front there, you've got a ton of different power options, including the all-important USB-C and 2 USB-A ones there as well. You'll also see that on the top there is a wireless charging pad, so I can just put my phone on there and it will wirelessly charge your phone. That's a 15-watt wireless charging pad. Now I live in a fairly rural environment, and in the winter, but more frequently in the summer, during the heat, the hot days, we lose power quite a bit. And this, I've done the math, will power my phone up to 15 times, or my laptop up to 3 or 4 times. But more importantly than that, I could plug in my Starlink. When I said I'm rural, I really meant it. This will power my Starlink for about 2 hours or so. You can do a turbocharge with this, plug it into the wall, and in 1.3 hours it will charge it to 100%. But if you want to charge it completely for free, just from the sun, they do a PV200 solar panel, which gives you 200 watt charging and will charge this completely for free in 2 hours. This one I've got right here is the EB3A. I like the fact that it has the screen on there and it shows me everything in real time, how much power I have left, and also the handle. Just makes it convenient to travel about. I can throw it in the back of the car, take it home when I need to. EB3A, there's a link to this one down below and all the other options that Bluetti has. Thank you, Bluetti, for sponsoring today's video. Now this little switch right here, oh, we need to remove that tape. That's how you hide things when they're not released yet. Just cover all the logos. This little switch right here has been really nicely implemented on this lens. It's not the first time we've seen this. The 24 to 70 GM Mark II had this on there as well. Essentially what this does is when you want kind of a looser or smooth, as they call it, zoom there with the 28, or from 28 to 70, you have it on smooth. If you want it a bit tighter, you can really make it a lot tighter with this. And I don't know if it's just the size and the weight of this, but it feels, the tight on this feels a lot tighter than it does on the 24 to 70 GM Mark II. It's just a little detail there, but the more that I use it, the more I kind of feel it in my hands, the more I notice it. Now, of course, there's going to be the generic things that everyone wants to know about this lens. We're at the point now with glass in general, even with third party, that you don't even need to test it, but people are still going to wonder, is it sharp? Yes, clinically sharp in the corners, in the middle. That's what Sony's goal is with these lenses, is to make them as practically perfect in every way that they can. Is the autofocus going to work? Well, you've seen throughout the whole video here, I can see the little eye box tracking me the entire time in the frame here. The autofocus is going to have 0 issues. There's never going to be a chance now, or an opportunity now, I think, when Sony releases a lens, or any company releases a lens, where the autofocus performance is going to be bad. We're past that. And does it have focus breathing? Well, Doesn't matter, because if you have one of the newer bodies, you can use focus breathing compensation and all but eliminate it anyway. I'm on the FX3, it doesn't have focus breathing compensation, but for reference here, we are at about 60 mils at F2. No, we're actually at F2.2. Let's change it to F2. Let's drop that ISO down. So now we're at F2. Look at the edges and the corners. That's where you're gonna see your focus breathing. But remember, you have focus breathing compensation, it's not gonna matter anyway. Another good design choice with this, the barrel doesn't extend very much at all, meaning that most of the weight, the mass of the lens doesn't really move forwards or backwards. So if you did wanna balance this on an older gimbal, and I say older because if you have a newer gimbal, it picks up the slack for any little imbalances anyway. But if you have an older gimbal, maybe like an RS2 or older, you can put this on there and really not have to worry about it changing the balance too much. And while this isn't technically a macro lens, I mean, it's not a macro lens, the minimum focus is 0.38 meters or 38 centimeters. If you're at 28 or if you're at 70, doesn't matter, everything in between. So you can get pretty close to things, and if you want to get even closer, you can use crop mode as well. What I think Sony has done here is created the perfect photo video hybrid lens for wedding photographers and wedding videographers. It's a lens they can leave on their camera throughout the whole day. F2 versus f2.8 is going to be better for low light situations, which typically happen at weddings. Because it has that good minimum focus, you can get in good and close for detail shots. A little bit of extra depth of field is going to be good for bokeh, for background blur, for portraits, for video sessions. And with the barrel extending ever so slightly, it's great for people flying it on a gimbal as well. 24 to 70 is a general lens that a lot of people are shooting for weddings. That difference between 24 and 28 for weddings isn't going to be huge. For other things, yes, it will be, but for weddings, not so much. This is very much the perfect photo video hybrid lens for weddings, for event coverage, for portrait sessions. And because of that, I don't think it's going to be a lens that appeals to a lot of people, especially with the price involved as well. Don't fall for gas and think, oh, I need this lens. If you have a 24 to 70, chances are you're probably fine with that lens. You're not going to need something else. Don't feel like you always need the new stuff. That's it. If you do want to buy it though, there will be a link down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.